Hey folks, I'm Bailey Reed, Senior Advisor on Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Prevention and Support at Carleton University's Equity and Inclusive Communities. And today I'm joining you from my home office in this time of social and physical distancing to talk about how we can keep it consensual in this time of COVID-19. So one of the most important things to remember is that just because we're physically distancing or socially distancing, it doesn't mean that consent is a given. So sexual violence can absolutely still occur in this time, and we want to talk about this because even though we're not physically together, you may still be doing Zoom dates or hooking up with folks online, pursuing folks over dating apps, and it's really important to remember that the ideas of consent still apply. So how can you make sure that you're keeping it consensual in this time of COVID-19? So I think a great place to start would be thinking about what does sexual violence look like even when we're not physically together. And I think it's important to remember that sexual violence is not just physical. So sexual violence can be rooted in attitudes and beliefs, and that's really important to remember. So thinking about misogyny and sexism, which are absolutely contributing to sexual violence, but there are also other oppressions that play a role there. So things like racism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia, ableism, all of those intersecting oppressions can impact the way that someone experiences sexual violence or the kinds of sexual violence that they experience. So some of the examples of this would be sending someone too many DMs or texts or FaceTime requests if they're not interested, particularly when those things are sexualized. Pressuring someone to send nudes, sending them nudes without their permission, certainly sharing intimate images that you get without their permission, using cyber spyware to track someone's online location or their texts or social media, really kind of invading their privacy of their online life in that way. Or, again, using that derogatory language that's rooted in misogyny, but can also be impacted by racism or homophobia or ableism, and thinking about how that works when either someone gets turned down online and they decide that they want to insult the person using that kind of language, but it also impacts the way that you may pursue someone online. So fetishizing someone on the basis of their racial identity or on the basis of their body, those all impact sexual violence, and it impacts the way people experience, especially online sexual violence. So here are some of my tips to make sure you're keeping your hookups happy. So one of the best and most important piece of advice I can give, and I can give this online or in real life, is never pressure someone. So remember, relenting is not consenting. So if you're trying to convince someone to do something and they're not really into it, or they're kind of trying to bargain with you of something else that they can do instead, that person is not interested. We have to remember that consent is always enthusiastic, it's sober, it's ongoing, and it's of equal power. So someone who relents and finally sends that nude is not enthusiastically consenting to do that. So that would not be okay. So to make sure that you're doing that, my biggest tip is to always get permission. So never share photos that someone else sent you, especially intimate images. So intimate images, if you share those without someone's consent, not only is that illegal, it's just not okay. So that's not a good thing to do. The other thing that kind of goes along with that is never screenshot or record someone's image that they send to you that's intended to disappear without their permission. So if they send it to you and think, this is going to disappear once you see it, if you screenshot that, that's not okay. So if you want a permanent copy of that file, then you should ask them for that image. In that same vein, never send intimate images without permission from the person who's about to receive them, especially in this time of being home and we don't know who's in the room. It's really important that you don't surprise someone with a very intimate image because you never know who's looking over their shoulder. So always ask their permission before you send that to them. And finally, if you're in a relationship where you are sending those intimate images to each other and that relationship somehow changes, so if you break up or if that person tells you that they're no longer interested in doing that or they don't feel comfortable doing that anymore, then it's really important that you don't continue to pressure them to do that, but also delete those images. So do everyone a favor and delete what you have of your exes. Sexting has boundaries too. And I think we've heard from public health officials that sexting is one way that we can keep our sex lives healthy and happy in this time of COVID-19. But remember that it's really up to somebody what they feel comfortable doing. So if they're not comfortable showing their face, that's their choice. How much or how little clothing they want to wear is their choice. And again, what they want to say is their choice. So never pressure someone into being more explicit than they're comfortable with. Because remember, consent is always enthusiastic. And that still applies to sexting too. So finally, take a hint. This also applies for in real life too. But if you're getting left on red, if you're getting one-word answers, if they're ghosting you, that person probably isn't interested. So if you happen to notice that you've turned someone's DMs into your diary, that's a good indication that it might be time to move on. And if it's time to move on, then the good way to do that is to just wish them well and move on. So we're not going to then barrage someone with every terrible thing about them, particularly if it's rooted in those intersecting oppressions, right? So we don't want to be like the nice guys of OkCupid. Finally, remember that it's never okay to hack into someone's private online life. So that would include even asking your partner for their password. Asking your partner for their password is actually in many ways controlling and can be a sign of dating violence. So just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean that you have to share your password with anybody. And it's really important to remember that. If you don't trust your partner, that's a different conversation, but asking them for their password is not the right thing to do. And of course, same thing if you're hacking into someone's cloud storage or into their social media, all of that matters and none of that is okay. So it was really great doing this with you. You folks are awesome, and if you had any questions today about what came up, then please send me an email or get at us online. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And Equity and Inclusive Communities wants you to know that we are still here for you. We are still seeing clients. So if anything that I said today makes you feel like, maybe that happened to you or it happened to a friend of yours and you want to chat and get advice, then we can absolutely still do that. So thank you very much, and we look forward to continuing this series soon. Have a great day.